Hello everyone, it's Maha. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. I'm so excited, everybody, because tonight I'm going to begin the first series of my tarot and astrology videos. I know some of you have been patiently waiting for this first series. So what I'm planning on doing is making two separate series. In the first series, I want to help you, kind of guide you, map out which tarot cards correspond to your astrological birth chart. And then in the second series that I want to do at some point along the line in the future, I want to go through all the 78 cards one by one and talk about their astrological associations, symbolism, and all the insights that I found throughout the years of studying tarot and astrology. So for the first series, what we're going to do is take apart the important elements in your chart. So your main planets and the angles in your chart and any planets that are prominent in your chart. We're going to look at your chart and then kind of dissect it and find the cards that correspond to your chart. So in this first intro video, I'll just briefly discuss what each of those planets and angles mean. And then in the following videos, we're going to look at which major arcana cards, which minor arcana card, and which court card directly link to your chart. So are you ready? I hope you're excited. So the first thing you want to do is first you have to have your birth chart if you don't already have it. I'm going to post a link down below of Astrolab. That's one of my go-to links for getting an accurate free copy of your birth chart. So if you haven't already done so, you can go there. You will need to type in your birth information. So you'll need your birth date, obviously, the time that you were born, and the place. The time is really important here. You need to be as close as possible, even to the minute if you can, because sometimes a couple of minutes can change your ascendant sign. So if you have an approximate, if you ask your mother, your father, your caretaker, your grandparents, whoever, to tell you if the time that you were born, if they don't know the exact time, if they give you something like, well, it's between 7:30 and 8, you want to know, you want to ask them questions. Really just try to get curious to if they know how close to 7:30. Is it close to 7:30 or is it closer to 8? Is it just after 8? You know, you want to really investigate and find out, you know, ask questions if you can to get the correct time, because that's going to be very important. If you have any questions, by the way, throughout this video, don't hesitate to write a comment down below. I'll try to help you as best as I can. And I'm going to make these videos as simple as possible and as short as possible. I know that many people are really overwhelmed by astrology, and I don't blame them. Astrology is a complex body of knowledge, and it's a huge study. It takes many years to get a good grasp at it. And sometimes with astrology books, we get into it and then we kind of after a while give up or maybe continue later on. So my aim is to make these videos really accessible to anybody. So you don't have to know anything about astrology previously. So don't worry about that. I'm going to be very short, very brief, and just try to make it as interesting as possible for everybody. So I'm assuming that you know nothing about astrology and that you can just get your birth chart. Once you get your birth chart, then we can begin. So you're going to get your chart and it's going to look something like this. A circle with all these lines and numbers and glyphs. And by the end of this video, you're going to have a really good idea of some of the important elements in your birth chart, and you're going to read it and you're going to feel really good about that. So if you go onto that website, the Astrolab, it will tell you your sun sign, your moon sign, and your ascendant. So you don't need to know any of the glyphs, by the way. However, having said that, I'm going to link a slide at the end of this video where you can find all the planets, the glyphs of the planets, and the glyphs of the signs. so you can refer to that later. So let's look at the glyph of the sun, because looking at the glyph of it, and actually looking at the glyphs of all the planets, we can gain some insight into what that planet represents. For the sun, we have a circle with a dot in the middle. So what is the sun? The sun is the center, like a circle with a dot in the middle. It is the center of the self, just as the sun is the center of the universe. The sun in your birth chart is the center of your inner universe. It's the core of yourself. It is yourself. It's at the heart of yourself. The sun in medical astrology rules over the heart. All the signs and all the planets rule over a body part. So it's interesting that the sun rules over the heart, being the center of us, center of our body, and a very important organ of our body. It is a very, very important planet in astrology. It's technically not a planet. We call it a planet, which is why you hear everybody always talking about their sun sign, their zodiac sun sign, because it is a very, very important part of our being. It is our ego. It is the I exist. I am someone special and unique. I'm an individual. I am here. Ego in Latin, ego, means I. So you can think of it as your core self, like I said. It's your specialness. It's also your life purpose. It's what you are here in this lifetime to do. In the process of individuation, it is who you are becoming. So we're moving towards our sun. We are becoming our sun. This is why it's at the center of our chart. It's a very important planet to look at. So the sun, the sign that your sun is in, you're going to note that down. That's important for you to know. And you're also going to note down what sign your moon is in. The moon is kind of behind the scenes. We see the sun, it's right there, it's shining. Whereas the moon is more hidden, more quiet, more unconscious sometimes. I made a video about working with your moon crystals. If you haven't already watched it, I'm going to link it down below because I go into more in depth what the moon represents in your birth chart. And the moon represents your emotions. It is how you predominantly react to emotional situations. And the glyph, of course, as most of you know, is the crescent moon. So that's simple enough to remember. Now, the ascendant and the midheaven are not planets. They are angles in the chart. And I'm going to switch to camera so we can have a closer look at one of the charts and talk about how to find this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to strip the birth chart to its very bones. Here we have a circle split into two parts by this vertical line, top to bottom. Then we have our circle again. Here we split it up even further into 4 equal parts, creating the 4 quadrants. And here we have a 90 degrees angle. So we've created 4 90 degrees angle. And if we follow these lines, we see that it touches 4 sides of the circle. These are called angles. We're going to come back to them in a moment. So the circle is divided further, split into 12 parts. So 12 slices of a pie. If we superimpose those two charts, here we have our 4 quadrants, starting with the left, first, second, third, fourth, and then we have all the 12 slices. And that's the east, this is the west, top is south, north is bottom. Now we're looking at what we call houses here. So the 12 signs of the zodiac they each correspond to those 12 slices of the pie, 12 sections. So here, the circumference of the circle is what we call the zodiac belt. So you see the glyphs of all the 12 signs all around the circle. Each slice of the pie, which we call a house, is ruled by a sign. The first one here is ruled by Aries, and one planet in traditional astrology, 2 planets, 1 or 2 planets in modern astrology. For the purposes of this video, we're only going to look at 4 of the signs. We're going to look at the first sign, which is it's Aries, ruled by Mars. The 4th sign, Cancer, ruled by the moon. So we're counting from the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right across from the first, we have the 7th house of Libra, ruled by Venus. And then we come up to the 10th, Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. So we're going to just briefly talk about these houses. Each area of life represents a house. So each house represents, in other words, an area of life which the signs and the planets play out in. The first house is the house of the self. And that house, ruled by Aries and Mars, naturally. So obviously these signs are going to shift and move around for everybody's charts. They are naturally in their home positions. So each planet has a home that it naturally belongs in. They're naturally ruled by these signs. So self, the first house, is ruled by Aries and Mars. But because we're all born at different times in different parts of the world, these signs will shift around and move around for everybody. But this is the basics. This is the very first starting point of all the signs. And so to understand what the ascendant and what the angles mean, we have to look at what these houses represent. The first house is the house of self. Opposite from that, the house of others and relationship with others. So the house of self, which right here, this first eastern point, this first eastern angle starts with, is right on the ascendant. The ascendant is the beginning of the first house, the house of self. Opposite to that is the descendant. Descendant represents others and our relationship with others. Then the second angle, we have what we call IC, and the IC represents home. It falls right on the 4th house of Cancer. Home, family life, our roots. And opposite to that, we have the midheaven. So one important point for us. The midheaven falls on the 10th house of Cancer, representing the public domain. So our role in society, sometimes this can be our careers, because our careers are what the others, the public, other people in the public, how they see us, and our role in the society at large. Our role in the society at large, the public domain, the outer world. Whereas opposite to that, we have the inner world. So you can see this beautiful symmetry playing out here. Astrology is beautifully symmetric. Everything really makes sense when you get into it. So here, the house of the self, the ascendant represents the house of the self. Opposite to that, the descendant, relationship with others. The public, the outer self, the inner self, the home and family. So for us, we're only going to look at the ascendant and the midheaven. The reason for that is because the ascendant and the midheaven relates more to our personality, whereas the descendant and the IC are more about our relationship with other people, relationship to home and family. So we're going to look at what directly relates to us, how we are seen and how others see us. So we're going to switch the camera now. But before I switch back, I just want you to just pay attention to one thing here. And this will help you really understand the ascendant and the midheaven. So, by the way, I hope you like my diagrams. So here, I want you to just take a look and imagine that you're standing right in the center of this circle, right at the X. So this is the horizon line. This is what we call the horizon line. So if you're standing right here, what is above you is the sky during the day. What is below you is the darkness of the night. The sun and the moon and all the planets begin to rise at the horizon from the east. So they travel from the east all the way to the descendants at the west, and then they descend into the darkness of the night here in the north, the dark night. So if you take a look at your chart, and if you find your sun, the circle with a point in the middle, anywhere at the top of the chart, that indicates that you were born during the daytime. And if you find your sun anywhere on the bottom of the chart, that is a nocturnal chart. It indicates that you were born at night. That's just something little for you to know. So before I switch back, I want you to just imagine you're standing right there at the center of the circle. So the birth chart is a snapshot of what the sky looked like at the time that you were born. So if you remember that circle, that X right in the center, if you're standing right in the center of this circle and you have the horizon line, the sign, the astrological sign that was rising from the east is your ascendant. So whatever sign was coming up from the east by the horizon, that's your ascendant. And then if you look up directly at the sky, whatever sign, whatever zodiac sign was right above you, from that middle point, that's your midheaven. That's the sign of your midheaven. Right, so you're going to have your ascendant and your midheaven, the sign of your ascendant and the sign of your midheaven. So now let's talk about these two angles. What is the ascendant? Anyway, what does it represent? So your ascendant is your persona. The persona is the face that you put on when you go out to the world, when you meet people. It's not the same as your ego. It's not yourself. It's your mask, this mask that you're putting on out with others. And I'm going to explain that in an example in just a moment. So it's how you first make a first impression on someone that you meet. And then your midheaven, the sign on your midheaven, talks about how you are seen in public at large. So not really one-on-one, but your role in society. It could also be your career. The first house where the ascendant falls on is the house of the self and the physical body. So a lot of times a sign on the first house, cusp, which is the ascendant, as we saw, can even describe what you look like physically. And so your midheaven, being where the public, outer world, falls on the 10th house. And the 10th house represents the house of career, of accomplishments, of goals, ruled traditionally by Capricorn. Don't want to confuse you too much though, so we'll just remember the persona, the face you put out in the world, ascendant, and then how you are seen to the public, what your role is as you live your life to the general public. So let me give you an example now. Pretend you're at a party, and so you're socializing and you're making small talk, talking to everybody. You might have, let's say you have a Gemini ascendant, let's say you have a Scorpio sun, a Cancer moon, and a Pisces midheaven. I just made up a portrait of a person. So you meet this person. Let's say that's me. I go to the party, I'm socializing, I'm making small talk. Social butterfly is the Gemini ascendant. But once you get to know me, once you get to talk to this person, then you find out they're actually quite deep emotionally. They actually like to get into really emotional conversations, study psychology. They have this whole hidden self that you didn't know about. That's the sun in Scorpio. And then you get to know them even more intimately, and you find out that They are very intuitive. They're psychic even. Moon in Cancer. And they are an artist. They happen to be an artist. Pisces. So our artist could be Pisces, could be mystic, could be very spiritual. You know, there's a whole range of keywords that we can find with every sign. This was just a brief example to tell you kind of what the difference is between how these different layers are kind of interacting and creating a dynamic within your personality. So this all to say that you are not just your sun, you are not just your moon, you're a combination of all your planets. And then if you have another planet that's close to one of the angles that we talked about, the two angles, the ascendant and the midheaven, then you bring in another planet into the chart that's very important for the person. So let's just switch the camera and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm gonna show you a couple of charts and talk about how you can spot which angles, which planets are touching your angles and important for your tarot portrait and for your personality. So right here, hopefully you can see, and if you can't, you will notice in your chart that the axis, the two lines that we looked at in the beginning that split the circle into 4 parts, are usually marked bold so that you can distinguish them from the other lines. And right here at the top, which is the midheaven, we have our sun touching the line. So you want to look for any planets that are touching either the midheaven or the ascendant. So in this chart, we've got the sun touching the midheaven. That's a very, very important mark for us to know that their sun is a really big part of how they are seen in the outside world. And then right here, we have a glyph, which is the glyph of Neptune. You can find those glyphs, as I said, at the end of this video. And that's touching the ascendant. So Neptune, and whatever Neptune represents is a big part of this person's personality, their persona. And another thing to note, and I'm going to show you in this chart, is that the line, the vertical line that goes from top to bottom, is not always completely straight. Okay, so it might be a little bit shifted to the left or right, and that has to do with timing, of course, and calculations. So in this chart, we also have Neptune touching the midheaven, which reads slightly differently. So then when Neptune touches the midheaven is how you are seen. That planet represents a big part of how you are seen in the outside world. And when it touches your ascendant, which it did in the other chart, it's how you are seen when someone first meets you, the impression that you might make. So the top maybe can indicate how others see you in your career, your coworkers, the public. Okay, so pay attention to the planets that are really touching the line. So not like this Venus here, you know, we don't want it to be too far apart. Even the moon right here, if you can see, it's a little too far away. I really hope you can see this. So you want it to be touching the line, directly touching the line. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Don't forget to ask me any questions if you're confused about something. I hope this all makes sense, and I hope it was clear. And so now you've got your sun sign, you know your sun sign, you know your moon sign, your ascendant, the sign on your midheaven. And you may have discovered that you have a planet that's also very important in your birth chart. So with that, I will see you all in part 2 of this series. Take care. I'm sending you lots of love. Bye.